welcome back. I'm your host, Coach Jeremy. I've got Matt with me, Matt Gardiner.
Matt Gardiner, very close. Very close. Yeah,
we just met about 5 minutes ago.
Literally,
we're part of the same coaching community. He was kind enough to open it up and say that he was looking for podcasts to be on, and so welcoming him to the Weird and Strong podcast this week. And as always, I've got a weird question for you, Matt.
Yeah, bring it.
All right. Quesadillas. Familiar?
Definitely familiar.
Love them. Or like them, at least.
Yeah, I'd say like 7 out of 10. Yeah, okay. For sure. Big fan.
Would you consider a quesadilla a grilled cheese sandwich?
Oh, that thought has not crossed my mind. Negation acknowledged. I mean, technically, I believe they would fall into that category, would they not?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's so interesting to me every time. Like, that's one of those questions that never gets old to me. Is like because some people are like solid. They're like, no way, no how. And they maybe come around to it.
Right.
Like they come around to it. And some people, they are just flat out, absolutely not. It is not a grilled cheese sandwich. It's like, if you do it on a flat top grill, it's got a bread product. It's got some cheese in it.
Absolutely.
Why couldn't it be a grilled cheese?
Why couldn't it be? That is the question. It is a negation question. I mean, we're, like you mentioned, the enlifted community and such, but yeah, interesting. It's so funny that these people that are essentially advocates for grilled cheese sandwiches and are against, it has to be like one way or the other. Like, I wonder what's so passionate about that, or if they're just, they like taking stances on things and having the back and forth that comes with that. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because now I'm getting into like the psychology of why somebody would say yes or no or being open to it. So I tend to be, on one side of it, like open to things, which is great. That's one of my monthly affirmations I'm working with. I'm open to all possibilities. Right. On the flip side of that, though, I can be easily swayed at times if somebody's super persuasive. So that's sort of the shadow work. Yeah. Right. So that's sort of the shadow work I'm doing among the, the openness. Right. So yeah, interesting opening question. I liked it.
Yeah. Usually the follow-up question is, if somebody says no, and we get into the reasons, well, it doesn't have actual bread, like wheat product or something like that. And I was like, well, what's or like a flour tortilla, and like pushing it. And it's like, well, the follow-up then is a mozzarella stick a grilled cheese sandwich, because it's got breadcrumbs on it.
Right. So mozzarella stick to me is like a different category. It's like it'd be like more of a snacker, or like, a finger food. That one is a bit of a stretch for me. I understand what you're saying if you're getting into the actual ingredients and preparation and such. Because it's not really a sandwich, though. You know what I mean? The
question then goes is, what constitutes as a grilled cheese sandwich? What constitutes as a sandwich? How do we define?
Sandwich is like a top and a bottom slice of some kind of bread product, or tortilla. To me, is a bread product. You find it in a bakery, right?
Yeah.
And then there's cheese that melts, and the way that it's prepped, whether it's on like one of those waffle iron type sandwich makers, or you can do it on off your stove and doing the flipping thing,
or like a flat top grill.
Yeah. That would be my my parameters for grilled cheese. Yeah.
There's I think I've brought this up a few times on the podcast already, but are you familiar with something called GitHub?
Yes.
Yeah. So there is a GitHub repository called the Soup Sandwich Salad Continuum, and explains everything in the universe as either a soup, a salad, or a sandwich.
Very cool. I'm checking this out for sure.
It's so funny. It's a wild mental ride where you're like, it makes sense, and I don't know why.
Sorry, was it soup, sandwich, and which?
Salad.
Oh, of course.
Continuum.
Of course.
Yeah, you got to get the trifecta there.
Absolutely. Just drawing a blank on it, but as soon as he said it, I'm like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm checking it out.
Matt, we're talking about, being weird. What are the ways that you show up unconventionally in the world? What are some of the things that you do that little outside of the norms of what other people would expect you to do, or how they would expect you to show up? Yeah. Open it up to you.
For sure. I think the most against the grain, I'm not sure how weird it's necessarily, because to me, it's not weird, was, I quit my job of 23 years, my career, last January. So almost a year ago to the day. It was actually like February 1st, which is time of recording right now, was my 1-year anniversary of starting my full-time coaching journey. So we're like right on the 1-year mark.
Congratulations,
right as
sir.
we speak. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I was doing the same job that I started when I was 16 years old, and just kept getting, promoted. It was always a transitional job for me, or so I thought, until I reached about 30 something, early 30s. And I was getting a lot out of the job, and I decided, I'm like, okay, initially I wanted to be like a musician. Well, I am a musician, but enough to sustain myself. Right. Yeah. I know it's a guitar in the background. I'm sure that'll come up in further conversation.
Yeah.
I realized after I had some other adult things happen, I purchased a house, all of a sudden my, the need for money, regular money, increased. And the guys in my band, as we aged as well, started to have young families. So, I liken it to, the rec league hockey. Like all of a sudden the ice time is at like 10:30 on a Monday. Yeah. Whereas before we were playing 3-4 times a week, we were gigging and like 4 times a month.
Half the people aren't there half the time.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So the writing was on the wall, so to speak. So, yeah. So, I got to the stage where I was 22 years in, we'll say. And I was having this, I turned 40. This is 2021. I turned 40 that summer. And I was just like, man, every time I thought about me doing this the rest of my life, my career, my body started really locking up and contracting. Wow. And I was like, ooh. And then I started doing the justification things. I'm like, well, I do have 6 weeks paid vacation. So that's one of the really good benefits. It's like being in a relationship where you're like, well, yeah, like we like to go camping together. And yeah, like we have a lot in common. It's like this justification cycle I was going through. And so finally
really in it.
Right.
You're not really like, this is the best thing in my life.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, exactly. There was a lot good about it, but there was a lot that was really not jiving with me anymore. And so, I took 6-month leave of absence, and that's what led me into, enlifted community. And that's where I realized I did want to do something different with my life. To me, if you told me 2 years ago that I quit my job, right, and that I'd be having this conversation with you this morning, I would think that was pretty strange behavior for me. So in that sense, yeah, definitely weird, like the way that I reinvented myself and walked away from a job that I was making, close to 6 figures, say, 6 weeks paid vacation, the wonderful benefits,
all the things that people strive for in their professional career, for that's
stability. Great. Yeah, exactly. The stability, getting paid every Friday. There was a lot to it that was, I could have kept doing it, like I wouldn't say easily, but in a sense easily, right? It was on a little bit of autopilot going on just because I was so familiar with everything. And so that was definitely, that's the first thing that comes to mind for sure is doing a career pivot so late in life, as they say. Yeah.
When you were on that 6 months of leave, like what was the turning point that you're like, I know I can't go back? Was there a day, or was there a particular moment?
Yeah, there sure was. Yeah, that's a great question. It was like morning one. So I've mentioned this on a few podcasts. I had, like when I don't know if you've had this before. So you have your inner dialogue, your inner talk and such. And every now and then there'll be like a voice that is super loud and doesn't necessarily feel like it was you. Like there's something else there, whether like I am pretty spiritual. So like I view it as like, whether it's a guide, like I always think it's my gramps on my mom's side, because I had a really good connection with him and we lost him pretty early. So I have this like idea that it's him, and so it was a voice. The morning one that I woke up from that sabbatical, literally as I was doing my morning workout, was a voice that said, "You're not going back." And I was like, whoa, like that wasn't even a possibility for me. I was just, you know what I mean? Just easy my way into the hot tub kind of thing. Right. And then I can
relax.
Yeah, right. And I was like, okay, that's strange, And so I was just open to that. I remember going out into the woods. There's a campsite. So this was April 2021, and it was the campsite's closed. It opens like May 1st or whatever. So, it was still, but it was like nobody out there. And it's a campsite I've spent a lot of time in. I really connect with it. I like it. It's 45 minutes out of town. So, and I just had my phone out and I was just verbalizing all these different ideas. It was like the tap got turned on, and all these different things that had been accumulating inside of me that had no point of articulation just started coming out of me. So I had all these really cool ideas of just stuff I wanted to try, stuff I wanted to do, ideas that fit together. And I was walking around for probably 2.5 hours, and it got me really excited. And it felt like this like openness and expansion that I hadn't felt in very, very, very long time, if not ever. Like it was just this next level of it. And so I spent a lot of time doing like Mind Valley. I don't know if you're familiar with. It's like all these like great teachers that are on this community. Okay. It's like a great podcast, and it's like an alternate sort of university, I guess, if you will. It's really good stuff.
Cool.
So I got into like Ken Honda has like money stories. What else? There's some like chakra healing modalities and different things like that. So I got into that, and that was really cool just to kind of start getting back into like continuing education, so to speak. And it was
into the water.
Exactly. And then it was about 2 months into my leave. Like I opened a drop shipping pet store. Okay. Just randomly. I'm like, yeah, I was just trying different things, right? Seeing how it felt, trying different things to see if I could not have to go back to the job, essentially, right? And it just wasn't quite enough time. I started feeling these like stories, like the money story, even though I had saved enough money to sustain me for the 6 months. I felt this like collapsed distinction of my self-worth with money. I started feeling lesser than, because I wasn't making money, which I wasn't expecting, right? I mean, I'd been literally working into 22 years up to that point. From 16, I'd been paid every Friday for 22 straight years. And that first Friday showed up and I didn't have that paycheck in there. And it felt weird, even though like I'd mentally prepared for it. It really did feel weird in my body. Like it felt like I've definitely felt like diminutive, like lesser than. It was strange. Yeah. So I had to work on that. And then the time, dude, like the countdown, this self-imposed countdown. Like I got to get basically the rest of my life, this new life figured out in this 6-month interval of time. Instead of just enjoying it, I was like trying all this different stuff, staying up late at night, trying to learn as much as I could, taking out the trying. I mean, I was learning as much, as I was really committed to it. Right. And yeah, I just felt like this, sense of dread and failure that I hadn't quite figured it out. So I did go back for 4 months. Sorry, I'm gonna reverse just to go back into your question.
All good.
The other turning point was I met just randomly on a podcast. We both have our names in this like podcast pool where you can get guests on your show and such. Okay. It's called Guestio, and the guy's name is Mike Schwartz, and he's in Enlifted.
I know Mike.
Yeah. So Mike's a great guy. Shout out Mike. And he had me on his podcast well before I even knew who he was or what Enlifted was. And we just got to talking, and then he told me about marketing.
Also another musician.
Yes, exactly. That's what it was. Like he had a music podcast, and I had myself up on Guestio as a musician.
Oh, there you go.
So it was that was the connection, right? It was music. So yeah, exactly. So then within 24 hours, I'm on a call with Mark England, and Mark, shout out Mark as well. Oh, I promised Mark I would say this because of the way this podcast it came about. Yeah. Just the importance of showing up. So you and I were both on that Enlifted reloaded call, right? And then just the way that the magic worked. I met you, we messaged a few times, and here we are talking. So shout out Mark England, and just the importance of showing up and the possibilities that come with showing up. So wanted to get into that as well. But yeah, so Mike and I connected with Mark the next day, and then like 3 days later, I was on a Brandon Powell breathwork that Mark invited me to. And halfway through the breathwork thing, I'm like, this is what my life is missing. Like this community, this type of stuff, these people, just the energy. And, I had a lot to do with the breath work, giving me this like lightheaded. I was feeling all like, all in the clouds. So I'm like, this is rad.
Riding that rocket ship for the first time.
Yes, exactly. So, and then a couple of days later, I signed up for level 1. So I graduated level 1 just as I was going back into my old job, and like, perfect opportunity to like integrate this new me with my old life, so to speak. And it was incredibly challenging and frustrating, and just felt like two different versions of me just butting up against each other. So I was there for.
When you think about that conflict, was it because it was so easy to fall back into old patterns?
100%, man. Yeah, it really was. Yeah. It's it's like, I liken it to like whenever I came back from a holiday, I was all like, I got this fresh, perspective on everything. I'm not going to let the little things bug me anymore. Like and then within a day I'm like that. And then by day 2, things are starting, you know what I mean? So
the first little thing that trips you up, you're immediately back to like the week before you went to your holiday or vacation.
Yeah, yes. Maybe more so because there's like this week of accumulated energy. People are waiting to talk to you. I'm like, did you know what they did? And I'm like, so, right. So it was very much like that. Like I found like the first 3 days I was like using the Enlifted stuff and it's, really managing my energy well. And by day 4, specifically in the store I went back to, the morale was quite lowbrow and everybody's sarcastic and stuff. So, like you talk about the grandfather clocks, like they're all the clocks in the store. Eventually they start syncing up. Yep. So I found my energy syncing up and I can be very sarcastic and so forth. And so I was definitely doing that. And it just felt like more natural because that had been how I'd been with sarcastic humor and a little bit more lowbrow and such. And like, it just felt yucky because I was so aware of it and I knew there was a different way to be. So it was, that was very challenging and needless to say, there was good experiences, all in all though. So, the thing that propelled me to quitting was, level 2. I joined level 2 right away. And the January, I want to say it was 18th of 2022 was the grad call for level 2. And, Mark and his like presentation skills and just, by the end, he shows this amazing video. It's like I don't know if he showed it for you, where it's like the Sasquatch festival. Yep. There's like this crazy, dude. Yep. As soon as and then he did like the whole, like the analogy, like, like hold the rhythm and do your thing and your people will find you. Mm-hmm. And I got like, so I'm like, kind of get emotional talking about it now. Like I got so emotional and then it cuts to him and he's tearing up and everybody in the call is this, and, and then he does like the power vested in me, blah, blah, blah. And then, the graduation thing. Right. And then he just hangs up. And I just remember staring at my computer screen for like 5 minutes and just breathing and taking it all in. And I was like, I'm quitting tomorrow. That's like, I'm going to do like, just everything you just said. That's what I want. That's what I'm going to do. No more effing around. And, so I did, I typed up my letter, but then I also realized there's like monetarily, there were a few things I had to get in line before I just like outright quit.
Just like walk away, no plan.
Right. Yeah. So like I refinanced the house and got like approved for the new mortgage. And then like the next day quit. So they didn't know that I was like no longer had that income coming in. So, just things like that. Cause otherwise if I just outright quit, sure, it would have been that romantic story about like quit, blah, right? Which would have been great. And then I'd be like, oh shit, now like I got to go to the bank and tell them I'm like, just quit my job and I'd like to refinance, please. Right. So there was a few things that went through my head. I'm like, hey, first things first, I'll take care of this and then I will do that. So and that was it, man. So now I've been on that journey for the last year. It's great. The sabbatical very much was like training wheels for some of the stuff I mentioned. There was that money story, the imposter syndrome. You're definitely came up big time, right? Like who do you think you are? Like what makes you better than all these people that have to work? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm not saying I'm better. This isn't for me, right? Just like navigating that whole thing, which Enlifted has been a huge part of it. Yeah. So that's where I am today.
Awesome. So the obvious question for everybody, especially the ones that don't know you, is what are you doing now?
Yeah. So, I, right away, it was nice. I started taking the Strong Coach business mentoring program, right almost to the day. Like it was a very smooth transition from quitting the previous career and then starting up the Strong Coach. And that's just what really gave me that I have a tendency to, have a fairly divergent, I'm good at task jumping. And again, the shadow work of that is I lose focus, or I have a little bit harder time doing like the deep work in one topic. I jump around a lot. Mm-hmm. So that's how I imagine I would have been. And when I'm starting out as an entrepreneur or solopreneur, man, there's so much stuff and so many things so many balls to be juggling and plates to be spinning. And, the Strong Coach for that 4 months really gave me a path to stay on, right? Like, sure, there's some branches you can go off and try different things, but this is your path. And the next 4 months, we're all going to go on it together. We have support. I had a mentor. I had a group. We had group calls. We had, a curriculum to go through. And that was like that was a game changer. It was it really got me into the idea of like a niche. So, and that's what I'm, that's had that backstory to get to what I'm doing now, which is recovery coaching primarily. So like addiction recovery, sobriety, coaching, specifically with alcohol. And that was like my addiction, my drug of choice, or one of them anyways, was big time, was alcohol. A daily drinker from, I would say, late teens, throughout my entire 20s. Even into my 30s, I had a sober streak of about 3 years, 3 months in 2012 to 2015, and then decided I was cured from alcoholism and I'm like, I can moderate now, and spent the next like 3.5 years trying to prove that I could moderate to like a 0% success rate, no matter how I dressed it up, or, you know what I mean? And then, and I'll get a little ahead of myself, but since then I'm in, coming up on 4 years alcohol free this April 8th. So knock on wood, that continues. I'm sure it will, but don't like to jinx myself regardless. Sober recovery coaching was my niche. And dude, it was painful to figure out where I wanted to go, because like, as you know, the Enlifted method really works for any genre of coaching, business coaching. I was like, and coming out of the gates, I'm like, I want to help everybody, and then, realizing, okay, well, I'm literally an unknown. I'm just starting out. So why don't we just find a real specific group of people, to help. And it's based on my life experience, of course, as well, which to me, in a sense, don't necessarily need even coaching certifications at that point, just because I've lived it, have so much experience with it. And then just adding the Enlifted modality to it was just such a perfect fit. So I've been doing that for, I'd say that I started that as soon as I picked the, that niche. So April 8th. So I launched my podcast Beyond Recovery on my 3rd year sober birthday, which was April 8th of last year. So I've been doing my podcast for about 10 months and just talking with, people in the Instagram community, just letting them tell their story. Also having alternative health healers, and just having this, hence the name Beyond Recovery, like getting into this idea that there's no one way to sober up or to recover. There is many different modalities and people that you can outsource, and there's not just the one way to recover. AA and some of those rooms are amazing, and AA truly did save my life, and it's a big part of my recovery. Everything else that I've done as well has been a big part of my recovery. So that's one component. And the program that I've developed is very much branching into like other components. And the idea of Beyond Recovery is like, that's your foundation, is your recovery and your sobriety. I find that oftentimes that label then becomes the box that you keep yourself in, or that I could keep myself in. And I'm like, oh, I'm in recovery. And it becomes, initially, it's like this really empowering thing. And at a certain point, there's like for me, it crosses the threshold into a limitation, right? Like, oh, I'm in recovery. Yeah, exactly. Right. So I want to just,
because it's an identity, it has the possibility to be a limiting factor for you. Just 100%. Like you said, you put yourself into the box and you don't even know what's outside of the box because you're not even looking out of it.
Right. And there is, granted, it is good to have that box, especially when you're kind of like coming back into the world. You've removed this like substance that you've been on for that I've been on for, the majority of my adult life. So it is nice to have that like protective box. Right. And then at a certain point, I want to get out of that box, but yet have my firmly rooted in the box, if you know what I mean.
I think I had heard something similar being described in many ways, like over the past couple of months for myself, is viewing it as like fences. Like you got a pasture, and you need to have the fences for the barriers, or like the boundaries, so you know where you can play. And over time, you can start to push those barriers or move those fences out. Or maybe you decide, I can step outside of this, tiptoe out a little bit and see what's going on and come back in. And so it's being able to have the boundaries to know where you can play. Because if you can play everywhere, so where do you even start? Just like you talked about with your journey of finding a niche of like, it's everything. And if it's everything, it's also nothing at the same time.
100%. Yeah. Very well put. I like that boundaries one. Yeah. That's super cool. Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah. So, talking about your program and intermingling it with the Enlifted community, what are the other ways that sets you apart from other addiction or recovery coaches?
Yeah, for sure. So I like with the music background, that's one of the things I pivoted into as well. I really started getting into like sound therapy, the idea of sound therapy and sound healing, and, you know, using like the solfeggio frequencies. Anybody that's not familiar, I just give a quick crash course. So like if start with chakras, so you got like the 7 energy centers in your body, from root chakra up to your crown chakra, and you know, the different points in between. And so the idea is that there's like a vibratory frequency, like a pure tone, for example, for like solar plexus would be 528 hertz. So if you hear 528 hertz, it's like it would just be like a and that can be it's like, you know, when people have those sound bowls, right? Some people cringe when they hear those. Other people are just like, wow, they just like, it really quite literally resonates with them and for them. So, you know, and then so that note will be like a C on a piano, for example. You have to tune it a little bit. Instead of 440, you go to 444. And then you do a musical composition over top of that. And it's a little more palatable to a larger audience, right? So you have this beautiful musical composition where it's sort of the ambient spa music or new age music, right? Meditation music, we'll say, over top of this healing frequency, whole tone. And so I really got into that idea. I felt like growing up, I was big into you know, a child of the 90s. So like grunge was huge, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, I still love it, you know, but just such dark music, you know, and it was great when I was like an angry teenager. Right. But to listen to it now, it's like I can tell, like, I'm fairly sensitive of my energy and such. And, you know, unless there's like some real flood of nostalgia, where I'm like, yeah, I wanted to hear this right now.
Brings you back to a certain time and place. Yeah.
Definitely. Music has that power, right? Almost like nothing else. I was finding that when I was listening to like Rage Against the Machine, I'm like, I don't know, I'm not that angry anymore. You know what I mean? Or like, I understand the message, and I love the message, and I love the band. It's just, it wasn't, it's, the rock thing I pivoted from. I still play in, and it's actually funny. Like, so we had this like alt rock band that were very much like grunge inspired. And recently we've been doing like all acoustic, like super quiet, improv, like almost jazzy stuff. So we've really changed our approach as well. So yeah, the sound therapy thing for sure. Yeah, I have like a whole sound therapy library that we use for like, we do like Sunday events similar to Enlifted in that sense. And yeah, breath work. I'm getting into breath work. So I have a certification it's called resonant frequency breathing. Very simple, very effective. So I actually released a breathwork album on January 21st. So it's cool. Yeah, it's a combination of like all the chakra healing music that I mentioned. I do like a guided breathwork meditation, like sort of a how-to. So it goes into like resonant frequency breathing, and then into that like almost hyperventilating holotropic Wim Hof kind of breathing, and actually have some of my band's songs underneath that. So there's a little more like action underneath it, and then goes back into a meditation at the end. So I'm really proud of that. That was just combining, felt like, you know, 20 plus years of musical, you know, experience and you know, jumping from the band music to like sound therapy, just combining everything, right? It felt very artistic. So I was very proud of that one. So yeah, combining those two things, I think just the, you know, and then the story work too. I think the three of those things really differentiate myself from, and just the fact that I'll always have one foot in like the 12 step, like the meetings and such. And I completely understand where they're coming from. And that was, for me, it's very rigid, and I think it needs to be. Like, I needed that rigidity at the beginning of like, okay, if you're doing, it's very black and white, binary. I found AA to be anyways, you know, and then, so for me, it's like having one foot in there, but then the other foot is very much of this like expansive other things that, you know, like I think the Enlifted method is all about finding like emotional sobriety, and they talk about that in AA as well. But sort of my very definition of it is the ability to feel all your feelings without this like idea that there's like a hierarchy of good emotions and bad emotions, right? I had this idea that like being sad or lonely was not right, so I would numb them, and then I feel shame if I was feeling them. So just removing all of that stigma or the need, like I'm feeling sad right now, but I'll bounce back quick. Right. I always felt like the need to say that to people and to do that to myself. Right. So getting into the stage where, I can feel my emotions regardless of what they are and take them for, what they need to be showing me. Right. There was so much stuff that I was running from, and even the pattern that I took out after drinking that I'm still reconciling now is like an achiever pattern, right? I feel less than if I can't come on your show and be like, oh, I've done this and I've done this and look at me, like I have this, like,
give me that gold star, give me that trophy.
Yeah, for sure. So like that is my new, I guess, addictive pattern or behavior. It would be like achiever or doer. I feel less than if I'm not crossing things off a to-do list all day, and that is like, in a sense, numbing myself as well, because, I'm getting a dopamine hit from crossing it off. I'm putting pressure on myself. I'm aware now. I definitely have like my dad in my head, some of my old bosses that were very 90s managers of like, this needs to get done yesterday. Why isn't this done yet? This isn't good enough. I took all that on because that's how I'm used to that dynamic. Right. So I, wear that coat and I have that inner boss in my ear, doing that, I catch it and such, but it's like, it's very much my default. Right. Which then that brings me into the shallow chest breathing. Right. And there's like an adrenaline, like a mild adrenaline dump that comes with that. And then all of a sudden I'm numbing myself again. Right. So I still have these patterns of behavior that have replaced the drinking. And as a result, I get a lot of this just like feelings in my body that I can't necessarily articulate because I'm so underdeveloped. It's been 20 years of running from them or numbing them. So it's very uncomfortable work, but it's like, I know it's like growing pains. I view it as growing pains, right? Like I remember, you probably remember when you were a kid, when you hit that one, like 10 or 12 years old and you grew a foot over the summer, like kind of felt uncomfortable, the teeth or whatever coming in, children
bones just hurt.
Bones hurt inside. Yeah. So I look at it like that, like uncomfortable and not knowing what I'm doing. I used to hate that feeling and just like felt out of control. And now I know I'm on the right path. If I'm feeling uncomfortable, if I'm feeling some growing pains, if I'm feeling that like bleh feeling, like I definitely been feeling that last 3 days, like even before we hopped on, I felt very just, gloomy. I felt very, I'm just trying, here I am like in real time trying to articulate. I'd say gloomy, miserable, perhaps not the right word.
Just outside of your, outside of your normal self.
Definitely. And being okay with that. Right. And I'm like, I feel that. I feel you. And basically I say to myself, like, I'm allowed to feel that way. Right. As opposed to like, no, go away. Like I'll hop on the computer. You know what I mean? It's like,
I can't have this feeling right now. Shove it down. We'll deal with you later.
Totally. Right. So like, I'm trying to like alchemize or integrate feeling that way, which I'm doing right now. Like I can feel it here. My normal routine would have been to, I don't know, just present myself just a little bit differently. Like it's a slight thing, but I'm definitely talking to you right now and still feeling that very like flaring up inside me, which is to me that's progress.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I read a very interesting book. I picked it up while I was on a vacation this past year, called On Connection. And like for myself, like I haven't necessarily struggled with addiction as far as like alcohol, drugs, things like that. Definitely for me in the past, there was an area of like food addiction. And the author of the book, which I'm forgetting their name off the top of my head, talked about this idea of when we overconsume something, whether it's, drugs, alcohol, sex, food, even behaviors, when we get into those patterns of I'm overachieving, I'm doing the thing, we're missing a connection somewhere. And I was like, I read that. I was like, oh, curious. Let's go further. And so like, could it be that I'm missing a connection with other people? Could it be that I'm missing a connection with myself? Like, so for myself, similar path, not necessarily to the extent of the time spent in a job that you did, but had a full career working in technology. Was an engineer, project manager, development manager, and decided to go away from that to become a coach without a great idea or great path of what I was going to do with it, or didn't know where I was going to end up or what path I was going to get on. And I look back when I got started in the world of physical fitness, which was in my 30s, not that long ago even. I was about 300 pounds, 45% body fat, didn't know anything what to do in a gym. Never, most athletic thing I had done in my entire life at that point was marching band. Yeah. And the patterns I had was you go out to happy hour on the Thursday, Friday night, stay out way too long, drink way too much, eat food at the bar that I'm not all that enthused about and also is not that healthy for me. Get home, still feeling something missing. So I order a pizza, eat the whole pizza, like repeat. I was like, even though I was out with these people and I was having this experience, I was connecting with them in some way, there was still something missing. I didn't know how to connect to myself to really feel the feelings that I was having, or really to even identify them. We spend our childhood and going into our adult lives in schools and in jobs where having a feeling is inconvenient. It's like, do that in the bathroom, do that somewhere else. Right. Go home, take a sick day if you're having a feeling.
Yeah.
And so they're like, I can't do that, so I'm not going to. And yeah, it's no wonder that we lack that connection to self and that connection to allowing ourselves to feel. I don't know if that's a similar feeling for you.
It is. And you said the magic word. It's allow. To me, it's allow. Yeah. Like I say that a lot. It's like permission, and to verbalize that, to say so I say there's mantras that I have to say, I'm allowed to feel like a failure. I'm allowed to feel rejection, and then breathe on it, the unlifted thing, and really feel where that shows up. And honestly, man, it'll show up somewhere. There'll be this tingly part that's never heard that before. In fact, I've spent my entire life doing the opposite of that to that side of me. So when I allow it, I'm like, you're invited to the party now. You're allowed to, it really, does it's so powerful. So I highly recommend that to anybody to try it. If there's some deep fear that you have, invite it. And you can say it to the pattern. So you can say you're allowed to feel. So you're saying it to your inner child, or however you want to view it. So you can verbalize it. You're allowed to feel like a failure. You're allowed to feel like a failure in my body. Or I can say, I'm allowed to feel like a failure. To feel. Yeah, you're safe to feel. Totally. Yeah. So both of those, a big one. Right? So it's just like all of a sudden this side of you, this energy that's inside you, that's attached to so many different memories and experiences, is allowed to come out and be like, oh, okay, and feel like part of you, and allow. So it's very powerful. I like what you're saying about, feelings being inconvenient. I found it too for myself being, a guy in the workplace too, right?
I was just supposed to be go there too,
right? The stoic, you know what I mean? Stress doesn't get to me. And people always used to say that, right? Like, oh, I would have never guessed you were stressed out there. And I used to think that was great, and I'd be cracking jokes.
Best poker face.
Right. Yeah. I would just be like, I'd feel burning up inside, but I'd have this and part of me is proud in a sense that I had this equanimity about me, or people viewed that. I was more so worried about that than what it was actually doing to me inside. Right. And then I'd bring it home, or just accumulate inside of me. I had no real, and then I'd reach a breaking point at some point, and people wouldn't take it seriously. They'd just be like, oh, you're just having an off day. Matt usually doesn't get upset. They'd miss the message, even though I was like, fucking
screaming
come on, right? Yeah. And they're just like, he's having an off day, instead of like, we should probably listen to him because he doesn't usually get angry, and he is. What's the message? Instead, they're just like, oh, he was pissed off, he's having a day, Yeah. And so there's definitely even when I get emotional with some of my comrades, where it's just like I'm going to get the fuck away from you. You know what I mean? Like, oh, don't do that. You know what I mean? So for sure. Yeah. It was like the inconvenience. So it's getting out of those patterns, or like, again, allowing the patterns to show up.
Get curious about it too.
Curious. Great word. Yeah. Allow, safe, curious. Those are all great words. Yeah. The whole, and going back to what you said about like over consumption and the connection piece, there's a really great TED talk I always recommend. This isn't the name of the TED talk, but if you type it into Google or the YouTube engine, it'll come up. And it's like the opposite of addiction is connection. So the opposite addiction is not, recovery or abstinence. The opposite of addiction is connection. And it very much supports your point, right? Where it's just like and it's kind of like the Gabor Mate thing. I'm not sure if you're familiar, any of the listeners are. He's a really great speaker on trauma work and addiction. So he worked a lot to addiction in West Vancouver and such, Canadian guy. And he talks about like, if you're putting all your energy on focusing on the addiction itself, that's like the byproduct of, say, a trauma or something like he mentioned, a lack of self-connection, and it manifests in this addictive behavior. So if you're putting all your focus on the addictive behavior, I mean, that's great. At some point you have to change the mechanism, like get the drink out of your hand, do the triage, of course.
Treat that symptom to the symptom issue.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. So, and that's where the real healing begins. So that was a lot of my journey was getting the drink out of my hand was the most important thing. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this energy now, because I spent a lot of energy, manipulating, telling people I was doing something when in fact I was at home drinking by myself, or different things like that, right? Not being involved with life. So, okay, what am I going to do with this energy? Because now I choose to be involved with life. So I started going to the gym every day. It's kind of similar. Sounds like, it was always on my periphery, but I found that, I'd have a couple beer and go to the gym. It was like the worst workout. I was like, this isn't working for me. I'm like, so it was always in my head. I'm like, one day when I stop drinking, because I always had a plan to stop drinking. I knew I had to. I was on a borrowed timeline because of the way I drank. I knew it. I was like, when I stop drinking, I'll start going to the gym, right? Classic, like,
but not today.
The not today thing, right? And sure enough, I did. So literally that's what saved me a lot of ways too. And they say, in AA and stuff, be careful when you're replacing one addiction for the next.
Yes.
Having said this though, like replacing drinking all day with going to the gym for 3-4 hours at a time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go with the gym. Right.
Yeah.
So having said that, that worked really well. But getting back to like, that was when I was 30. So I started getting into like self-development books and Wayne Dyer and different guys like that. And it was great. I didn't fully do the deep work on that, what we just talked about, like the actual, like the why behind I had this addiction in the first place. And that's what ultimately led me to drinking again. And that's what that's what the last, couple of years, I'd say the better part of the 4 years that I've been sober, I've been doing a lot of that, like deeper work, and then specifically getting into like Lifted and the coaching and so forth. The last 18 months or more, close to 2 years, I've been doing deep dives on it. Right. So, and yeah, that's where it's been most satisfying, but it's like, it takes a while to undo 20 plus years of patterns, behaviors, like you say, discounting my emotions, right? Pushing things down takes a while.
Yeah. Well, but it's the same thing as, if you look at from the physical component, like if you have somebody who is crazy overweight, did that happen overnight for them? Or was it likely that it took a long time to get to, like, I didn't get to almost 300 pounds just by like one pizza. Like that was 10 years of behaviors that were not serving me very well. I don't know if this is something that resonates for you as well, but especially as, guys in the world, that masculine energy of, especially when we have these, the inconvenience of a feeling is that we want, like, do you find that in the past you either looked to stuff it away or to solve it? And then rush to the solve my feeling.
Yes.
Rather than actually feeling it.
Yeah. 100%. Explain it away, or find a logical, exactly, way to solve it. And then same thing with the, how that shows up in the dynamics of a relationship. Like my wife and I have been together for 16 and a half years. Right. So it's like, Yeah, and we do have that, a little bit of that. It's like, I think there's some kind of, I forget exactly what it is. It's like the, the difference between a man and a woman is like the woman's like, I'm cold. Which the subtext is like, here, come and warm me up. And the guy's like, okay, I'm going to build a fire. And, he goes into like a problem solving mode when all she wants is like, hey, like come and warm me up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, that's totally true. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's shown up for sure. For me, it was like, I was afraid to, be my authentic self in a lot of ways, cause I am an emotional guy and I felt very like tempered or very stoic at the expense of what my true feelings were. Because it's like you start getting, it's either people are kind of allergic or adverse to, even if they see a little bit of tears welling up in your eye, they're like, oh, no eye contact. Let's get away from this guy. Right. Yeah. Even if that's just from passion, it's not even for like, I'm not going to like, it's challenging for me to cry. It's not necessarily challenging for me to tear up because if I'm passionate and I have that connection and such, but it is challenging for me to cry because of reasons that we've talked about already in this interview.
How has this worked? How has it affected your marriage?
Like the addiction part or the
so like doing a lot of this deep work, allowing yourself to feel, like allowing yourself to get into this space. What's that been like as navigating a long-term relationship like that? What is, if your wife was here, what are the things that she would say about this journey from the outside perspective?
Yeah, so it's interesting. She's had, I hate to speak for her, I know she would agree with this though. So she's had a very challenging for her to put herself in that spot where she can articulate. I view it as like there's a big block of ice still inside of her, and it's taking a while to thaw out, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just the way, the usual things, the way that she was raised and relationships with her parents and so forth, which they're both great now. Her mom has passed, and her dad has a great relationship. They have a great relationship now, but there was a lot of, things that as we've been talking about, accumulated for her. So she's had a challenging time with it for herself. Mm-hmm. I always had an ability in the context of our relationship to be myself. The persona and the ego drop when I'm with her. So, I was always able to do that even before I got into coaching. So that side of it was good. Having said that, it's a lot healthier now. My word choice, the way, just the word selection, or like speaking more in affirmations as opposed to negations and the things that we have learned, has definitely helped a lot. And we've done some story work coaching. She just actually joined my sobriety group last October. Okay. So she's been in it for the last 4 months, and it's made some huge headway for her. Just being in a group of like-minded people where it's just like everybody's being vulnerable and sharing about certain topics and such. Mm-hmm. And we've done 2 story work calls, myself and her. And it's been, like I say, very challenging for her, but she's doing great with it. And, we're getting there. Yeah, as far as for me, I think it's leveled everything up for me in the relationship. And the main thing for us was just removing the substances. We were like totally like the party couple, growing up, especially when I was playing in the like 3 bands, and I had a recording studio at my house, and, we'd have a pretty big like jam session or house party pretty much every week, every other week. And, staying up till 3 a.m. and, doing mushrooms and smoking a lot of weed and drinking tons of beer and such. And then, so to transition out of that into like a sober couple has been pretty interesting thing. And, she was about a year behind me on sobering up. And that definitely, there was, she wasn't drinking. It's not like she continued to drink all the time, but she would intermittently go out and then come back home. And I was just kind of pretty, inebriated. And I was like, I'm like, it's kind of the one thing. I'm like, this is the one thing that could, actually pull us apart. 'Cause we're kind of on different paths at this point if we continue on with this. And and then she was able to, she found an opportunity to put that down as well. And so she's going on 3 years in this summer. So she's, like eight months behind me or whatever it is. Yeah. So we were pretty close, pretty lockstep in it. Yeah, it's been great, man. So yeah, she's doing a great job with it. Like I say, she's part of the program. And just get back to your original question, it's definitely, it's leveled everything up for us, and getting into that like emotional sobriety that I mentioned, just all thoughts, there is still some old patterns, right? It's like I tell her that I'm not feeling well about myself, or there's like some some loneliness or some feeling right now inside of me. And she's like, oh, well, like, what can I do? And I'm like, no, like, I'm just letting you know, that's just how I'm feeling. Like, I'm not trying to bounce back. I'm not trying to like cheer myself up. I don't need you to come and like, I appreciate it, but I don't need you to come and, make it better for me. I need to, in fact, I should do the opposite. I really want to invite this energy and sit in it and process it and allow it to allow that energy to realize that it's like, yeah, it's totally safe to come up now. So that has been a transition, and that's a work in progress because part of me does still want to be comforted too, right? It's like, I feel like shit. Can you come cheer me up? You know what I mean? So there is a little bit of that. I'm fine admitting that. It's totally cool. So yeah, that's where the changes have happened for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Talking about, let's move a little bit on. What are the ways that you show up strong in the world? What are your strengths that you bring into your coaching, into your marriage, into your personal, professional life?
Yeah, I think like strengths for sure is that like welcoming feeling that I like to give off, which implies it's safe to come as you are. There was, it's when I was in high school, I'd say I always had like one foot in every group, right? Like all the typical high school hierarchies, like the nerds, the band people, the stoners, the bad kids and all that. I sort of dabbled in all of it. And, knowing now that it's like, it was a people pleaser and I was insecure and I didn't want to fully commit to anybody. So I just did my best to kind of like, you know what I mean? Be friends with everybody and harmonize with everybody as best I could, just so I'd stay off the radar. Cause I had been bullied, in grade 8 and 9. So I think a lot of that was like more of a survival thing than anything. Yeah. However, that I took that into my, like I had been bullied and I'd seen what bullying did to other people. And it really affected me enough to know that that wasn't my thing. So that was like the good side of it that came out. And I think, I guess being a musician has something to do with that, and being in like team sports where there's the competitiveness, where when I flipped into like a band, it was more of collaborative. So there's still a team, but it was collaboration versus like, the competitive nature that came with, I found that to be just too much pressure. I get very, very emotional playing sports. So music was like, I could get emotional, but like in a perceived safer way. So yeah, that was, the ability to just connect people, the ability to make people feel welcome. I champion my communication skills. Like I feel like I got some pretty good intuition and can read a room and figure out what's going on with people and give them a safe spot to, again, say what's on their mind and how they're feeling without any sort of judgment or fear of, rejection or that sort of thing. So, like unwavering support in that sense. And I think obviously getting back just to my whole addiction thing, just the understanding of avoidant behavior, escapism, and just have an incredibly intimate life experience with that. I think that really loans itself to a lot of people. Cause like, if you look at it, I dare say like pretty much anybody, there's going to be some degree of, addiction, whether it's gambling, porn, food, drink, right? And it's all that sort of subconscious way of dealing with something or avoiding something that you don't want to have to deal with, buffering it, right? So my ability to help with that, I think is a very big, strong suit of mine as well. Yeah, I think those are the main strengths. Like I really love connecting people and getting that collaboration is such a powerful word for me. Like bringing together a bunch of people and seeing what a group of people can do, as well as working individually with people, and then just like watching like over the course of a month or a few months for it all to come together. Final thing I want to mention too is just like loyalty and like the start, enlifted thing of start and keep going is a big thing for me. Like I've been playing with the same two guys. We've had a few different members come and go in band for like 16 and a half years for Darcy, myself, 23 years in the job before this, so very like, I love playing the long game on a lot of things. And I'm patient. And so I do champion that about myself as well, as like the idea that, things don't happen overnight. You can do all these micro changes and such. And if you stick around, all of a sudden it starts doing like that thing where you invest in something for long enough, 10, 15 years, all of a sudden you get that hockey stick style, increase in the gains and such. So really being like that farmer mentality, you know what I mean? Planting for tomorrow and having that faith, and that goodwill going forward. So that's my strengths in a nutshell, I would say.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing those too.
Yeah, for sure.
Before we wrap it up, like, what are the things you talked about your coaching program? What are the things that you want to bring to the Weird and Strong community? What are the things that you want to let them know about? What you want to promote?
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate you having me on the show. It went by very quickly, which it always does, and great conversation. I'd love to, I want to return the favor to you as well. You're always the door's welcome. Awesome. Come on my podcast as well. I'd love to have you on. Return the favor. Yeah. So for myself, I mentioned, Beyond Recovery is my podcast. So it's there's a few different Beyond Recoveries out there, and mine has just like a fairly crude graphic of some mountains and a river in front of it. It looks like a stick man kind of art, so very easy to find. So that's my podcast. It's recoveryroadmap.me is my Instagram handle, as well as the website. So www.recoveryroadmap.me. That's all about my program on there. A YouTube channel, and you can find me on Facebook with Matt Gardiner Live. So that's like an alternate podcast I have. It's sort of like a variety show where I do like sound therapy, guided meditations, guests of other, coaches and such that come on there. And it's like, my YouTube channel as well. So it has like all the different projects that I have going on all in one section. So recoveryroadmap.me and Matt Gardiner Live are my two handles. So you can find pretty much anything that you'd need off of there.
Fantastic. We'll keep those in the show notes and make sure that people can find you when they're interested to hear more and see what you're doing. So
brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show this week. And it was amazing talking to you for the first time and getting to know you and hearing about your powerful story. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I really like what you're doing. I love the idea of the show, and I know you're fairly early in the journey. I just want to say, like, I love the concept of the show and the format, the way it's very conversational, and you have a couple of interesting questions. I think you're doing a really good job, and pleasure's mine to be on. So thank you so much.
Until next time, I'm Jeremy, and this is the Weird and Strong Podcast.